Well, John Roca knows the auto industry in Australia probably better than anybody else. As you know, he's the managing director of Sydney City Lexus and Toyota, long-time advertiser with 2GB as well. And I thought we'd turn to him. He's on the line. John, great to speak with you again.
Good to be with you, Michael. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you. Let's just answer that last question first. How many showrooms out there up and down Auto Alley or Parramatta Road or whatever have a whole bunch of EVs just sitting on the showroom floor because no one will take it off their hands, but at the same time they're selling hybrids and combustion engine vehicles like are going out of fashion?
So the short answer is it isn't just motor vehicle dealerships and showrooms that have the cars, but there are cars on grass, as we term it, that are just simply not even making it to showrooms because car dealers are having trouble selling the vehicles that are already in their showroom. So the problem's a lot bigger than that. And if you do a little bit of homework and have a look at what's sitting on docks and in holding yards, the problem is much larger than we might think.
So the EVs just aren't selling in the way that they need to for a lot of these dealerships and manufacturers to be able to avoid the fines that are built into Labor's emissions standards.
That's correct. And if we have a look at the growth of EVs, the early adopters that jumped in early obviously grew that segment of the market. The problem is the early adopters they're driving their cars, but there aren't any more adopters that are forthcoming.
I was speaking with Mitsubishi Motors just the other week. They made the point to us, in fact last week I think it was, that a major impediment to more people taking up EVs is a lack of charging infrastructure. So, I mean, it's one thing, isn't it, for a government to say, well, look, 60% of new sold vehicles by 2030 have to be electric, otherwise there'll be fines and all the rest of it. But people who go out there to spend a lot of money buying one of these vehicles are saying, well, hang on, maybe I'm willing to do it, but how practical is it if I invest in one of these?
Yeah, it's a really good point, Michael, and that's the feedback that we're getting from our EV customers. And to be frank, we've had customers that have taken delivery of EVs and traded them back in a short period of time precisely for that point, and that is that there's two issues with it. One, there aren't enough. So look at last year, 91,000 EVs sold in Australia. In July last year, we had around 900 charging points, fast charging points available. By the end of last year, it was 1,600. So 1,600 charging points, 91,000 vehicles sold in 1 year. If you do the math, you know what the problem is. The other part is the infrastructure needs to be maintained. So the feedback we're getting from EV owners is when I do find a charging point, it's out of order, or I can't plug it in because it's been damaged. So it's anxiety that just seems to be getting worse. And this year, if we look at the uptake of EV cars, it's only up 4.4% of the market based on January sales. So the EV market is detracting. Consumers are walking away from EV cars.
It's a little bit like the old apartment block and the laundry debate, right? Unless you have a nice register of who does the washing on what days and when, you're going to run into trouble.
That's exactly right. And look, I think car manufacturers understand that EV is the future. The only argument is the time that they've put on the consumer and the pressure that they put on the consumer that say you must have one by 2030 or there will be penalties. And those penalties start July 2025. So it just doesn't stand to reason as to why they would do that and penalise the consumer. So if you look at your Hilux driver that's driving the diesel that needs it for work and family, this particular consumer may be paying the price for electric vehicles because of the fines that we passed on to the manufacturers. So if the manufacturers are fined, guess who's paying? It's going to be the consumer.
Always
and
is.
It'll be offset by the majority because there aren't enough EV owners to pay the penalty, so they'll penalise everybody else.
Okay, so just to explain to people who are still trying to work out this scheme, it has been well publicised, but basically the scheme requires companies to progressively lower the carbon footprint of their fleet that they sell in Australia and to cut the emissions of newly sold vehicles, as we said, by 60% by the year 2030, but the penalties start in a couple of months' time. So companies that miss that yearly target, they then have to pay heavy fines or then they go and buy credits from the suppliers that overperform. Now, am I right in saying the majority of those suppliers that will overperform are the companies that come out of China, the BYDs and these sort of things that basically just do electric cars. So why would an Australian government want to penalise their allies in Germany and France and the United States and Japan, but reward China through our automotive industry?
Yeah, look, it just doesn't stand for reason. And look, the calculations just don't work. So they have not done their homework. And if you look at the penalties that will apply from July 1 under the current scheme, consumers have to pay more because, and the other thing is, we haven't spoken about choice. So consumer choice will be affected as well, Michael, because there will be manufacturers that will not have cars available to meet the standards. Therefore, they'll have to push the price up of their current vehicles too high to the point where they just won't be viable to sell in Australia. So less consumer choice, higher prices, and then supporting, as you say, Chinese-built cars. It just, why we're doing this and not let the consumer vote just stands, it's very difficult to explain, isn't it?
Well, it is. And certainly when you then look abroad as well. I mean, I editorialised yesterday about some of these crazy decisions that have been made by Chris Bowen. He seems to be the sort of the genesis of a lot of crazy decisions. But overseas, not just foreign governments, but the foreign automotive manufacturers themselves are now starting to walk back rather clearly and very publicly their pledges to go fully electric and the rest of it. They've realised that, as you say, between consumer choice and practicality on the ground, the timelines that they had put in place are not practical, and if they stuck to them, they'd go broke. So why are we trying to replicate those timelines, considering that our geography is even more challenging for this type of technology than it is in, say, Germany or the United Kingdom?
Spot on. And look at our population and the impact on the environment based on our population. I mean, we're really, we're paying well over the odds versus our population and the impact to the environment. So it just doesn't stand for reason. And it's logical, and anybody that's listening to this would understand that it's not logical. And why it's been enforced, I don't know. The timeline is the issue. Nobody is saying that we don't want a greener future and cleaner air and less pollution, but
That's right, yeah.
Let's be realistic about it. We're all going down the EV route. I think the end game, frankly, will be hydrogen anyway, but that's a conversation for another day. But we're not against EV cars. Everybody is planning to build them. Consumers will buy them at the right price moving forward. The argument is the timing.
But it's not there's also a puritanical streak to this, though, isn't there? Because, I mean, you're with Toyota. You manufacture a lot of hybrids, which I suppose are the halfway house to the fully electric future. And yet, under the tax policies that we have in place, hybrids, innovated leases and the like, hybrids are not supported by the government, only pure EVs. Why do they, in their ideology, let the good become the enemy of the perfect?
Exactly, and it's a huge percentage of sales. If you look at how many hybrid vehicles are sold in Australia, as you say, it's a good midway point. It's massive. It's a very large percentage of car sales. I mean, Toyota alone, it's about 75% of what we sell, and consumers are happy with the car. You don't plug it in anywhere. So the midway point has been ignored, and we've gone too far the other way. So it just doesn't stand for reason. But anyway, it's an argument of time. It's not an argument of if, it's when.
Okay, just finally, John, because you've got to go and so do I. The Coalition today saying they will abolish the fines for car companies like yours if you breach these targets, but they will, it seems, keep the new vehicle emissions standards. Would they be better off just wiping the slate clean and starting again? If indeed, as you say, the timing is the issue.
Yeah, I think it needs to be reviewed. Why there would be a penalty, I don't know. I mean, I'm not the politician, but if there needs to be a penalty, it needs to be aligned with reality, which is the time.
Great to speak. Thanks for your insight as always, John.
Pleasure, Michael. Thank you.
John Roca, Managing Director of Sydney City Lexus.